You know, when you look up at the stars at night, they become far more interesting when you know what you're looking at. This is the Orion constellation, named after the giant super hunter of Greek mythology, the son of Poseidon. It is an area in the sky that has drawn quite a bit of attention from ancient people around the world. But why? Why is that? Not to mention the star series. There are monuments. You know, they just keep finding these pyramids everywhere. They're in the deserts, they're in the jungles, they're in the mountains, in the Arctic, in the oceans. They're all over the place. And when you look in Mexico, when you look in Egypt, you think, why would someone build these structures to mirror this constellation Orion? I mean, is this the answer to the question of who constructed them? Did you notice, folks, there are a lot of discoveries being made right now, and old tales of the ancients are coming back to life. What we used to call science fiction and ancient folklore seems to be making its way into our reality. So let us take a closer look at this constellation, these structures, the ancient Egyptians, and the beings they believe to be the gods of Orion.
Welcome to the Gilchrist experience. Now, what you saw there is an exposure to extraterrestrial life. It's a phenomenon that a lot of people don't believe. My co-host is one of them.
Yay!
But this is something for the future, for people to understand. The beginnings of creation come from the Sirius mystery. And this is an African religion practiced by the Dogons. Dogons have a religion, an African religion, that exposed them to the Nemos, which are the gods of Orion. So today we have with us Sister V.K. Pearson, Professor V.K. Pearson, and we're going to talk about African religions. Welcome to the show, VK.
It's always
Welcome
a pleasure
home.
to see you, and it's always a pleasure to be with you and Graham. And it's been a while, but yes. You know, it's important for us to understand that we gave the world the word, the concept of God, and the concept of divine, or the concept of the next, higher being, and that somewhere in the strangeness of it all, it got sold back to us in an unusual way, because when it was sold back to us, it sold it back to us as inferior when we were at the time when we understood the divine, completely aware of our superiority upon the planet.
I always say that we're the spiritual people of the planet.
We were
But
gifted that way, that's
when
right.
you realize that we're spirits of the universe, actually.
When you realize there is a universe, you have so many folks that don't like to go beyond. Being a part of City College and having Michio Kaku, who is a astrophysicist, a scientist of astronomy, and in astronomy as a science, he has been able to help us to perpetuate and understand that there are suns out there, that there are additional stars out there. And he has, of course, documented in all of his writing and material the importance of studying this information so that we can understand our existence and our purpose on the planet.
Really?
And I think it's important. Yes, he does magnificent work. He's been at the university now over 25 years at least. And his purpose, he's gifting the school his presence, because he's been who he is for a very, very long time. But he has tried to inform us delicately that we have to look beyond our globe and take a look at the reason for a Saturn, a Mars, a Jupiter, a Uranus, and then let's go beyond that. There are galaxies beyond the ones that we see in our telescopes. So having that common knowledge will open the mind, I think, of individuals who may be stuck in that very unusual place of not conceiving a higher power and something that created a universe and not just an earth.
Graham?
It's interesting with our sun, they say, is 1 million times larger than the earth, 900 and some odd thousand times bigger. And Alpha Centauri, which is the closest star to our star, you could put, I think, 1,000 of our suns in Alpha Centauri. The size of the stars and the galaxies is so vast, it's hard to figure these numbers, when they talk about billions of light years. And the Milky Way galaxy, which is like a dish, let's say this was the center of the galaxy. The Milky Way is one of billions of galaxies, and our galaxy is like a spoke on the wheel, but it's curved. It's not straight. It's curved, and it sits out on the far end of that. Oh, I'm sorry. It sits out on the far end of that spoke, and there are other spokes coming out of the center of the Milky Way galaxy. And it's billions of light years from the center out to the end of the galaxy on any one of those spokes. Scientists know that the universe is immeasurable because it is still expanding.
So does that give you the understanding that there could be additional life beyond ours?
There could be.
And that there could very well be higher thinking beings than ourselves?
Oh, there definitely is. God created it, so that's a higher thinking being, right? He's the creator. I mean, this stuff doesn't happen. You don't get order out of chaos.
Right. I just wanted to know because I know that it's difficult sometimes in this plane to feel and understand it. And I think that when we talk about the Dogons, and it's a good thing to talk about because we're going back even before Kemet when we're talking Dogon, right?
Well, they came from Kemet. I mean, they migrated from Kemet to Mali, where they are now.
But prior to the essence of Kemet, as we know it 10,000 years ago, there were these individuals who were learning about these galaxies, and there was a purpose to it, right? So they come out of the Nemo, and the Nemo wanted to invoke the Dogons with this amazing information, which through oral history they have maintained for thousands of years.
We all must realize that the extraterrestrials didn't only visit the Dogons. You go to the Mayan religion, and they have a history of being visited. And you go to the American Indian, they have a visitation story. There are stories about their pyramids throughout the planet. That's what the opening showed us. So the extraterrestrials have been here for centuries. I understand that you go even deeper and you understand that they experimented on us for millions of years. I understand that this is maybe I forget which experiment we're in, but these are vast, way out of, Star Trek and beyond. So it's a little hard for a lot of people to understand on this level. So we don't want to take you too far out. And we'll bring you down to earth and talk about an elder that taught us about religion, an African religion, Dr. John Henry Clark. That's item number 2. Prepare that for us. And this elder was born in 1915, right? So that's over 100 years ago. He would be 104 now.
That's right.
And his study of religion is quite different than what we grasp of Christianity, Hinduism,
Judaism,
and of course, what am I missing?
Islam. You can't.
Islam.
Well, the big 3 are the most important: Islam, Judaism, and Christianity.
Half of the planet studies Hindu and the other religions. But we all talk about one God, and God doesn't discriminate. Well, let's hear from Dr. Clark. Play item 2, and we get an idea of what the American sharecropper has to say about religion.
My grandfather.
Yeah.
Sharecropper.
We'll be right with you. There we go.
I was supposed to be here early. They gave me another assignment. They didn't pick me up to go to the assignment. I followed their instructions and waited at the hotel. I would love to be here when I can be more fully in depth on this subject, because there's a whole lot of illusions about Africa's relationship with other people in the world. There's a whole lot of illusion about our relationship to the religions in the world. And these belief systems that had its origin in Africa, all of them, and there is no exception, turned on African people. I said there is no exception. And there's one thing you have to get through your mind and keep it. Nothing that ever came from the European mind was meant to do anything but facilitate European domination of the world. And I said there's no exception. Everything that was brought into this continent, everything, every idea, every so-called religion was meant to dominate and to control. The Arabs had no illusions about it. The Europeans had no illusions about it. You were the ones with the illusions. And yet every element that went into the making of every major religion in the world started in Africa. Why is it that you are so naive? You let people redress something that you invented, sell it back to you, and enslave you through it. I'm saying that all organized present religions are male chauvinist murder cults. And I say there is no exception. Why I wanted to be here earlier, I wanted to deal with our relationship with the people of the world and the fact that we created peaceful nations that had no word for jail because no one had ever gone to one. No word for old people's home because no one ever threw away grandma and grandpa. No word for orphanages. We did all of this, and over half of human civilization was over before we knew that a European was in the world. Before he wore a shoe or lived in a house that had a window. Now, Africa has always and still is the prize for the whole world. We as a people have always been the world's richest people, culturally rich, mineral rich. We have always been the prize because we have always had and still have something that other people won't, think they can't do without, and don't care to pay for. Because we have always been the prize, we have been under siege for over 3,000 years. Nothing that ever brought into Africa from the outside was meant to do the African any good. That means all other religions. Islam was the handmaiden of Arab imperialism. Christianity was the handmaiden of European imperialism. The Hebrew faith was the handmaiden of a concept called the chosen people. Now, if God is kind and God is merciful and God has no stepchildren, he won't choose one over the other. And to say he chose some people, you're making him a bigot. And to say that he endorsed enslavement of one people over the other, you're making him an accessory to murder. The Arabs used Islam to rationalize their slavery and their imperialism. The Europeans used Christianity to rationalize their slavery and imperialism. Who are you kidding about friends in the world? Damn it, if you want a friend, look in the mirror.
I love that last one. You know, I always say, if you want to find God, look in the mirror and talk to God.
A friend, the
You know,
man
the
in
God
the
that
mirror.
lies within. The God in me loves the God in you, and that's what I mean by that. So what do you hear about our preaching from our true elder, sharecropper? son,
Dr. John
right?
Henry Clark, the great elder, the esteemed historical mind that he was trying to bring us back to a reality. And I guess it was shock therapy, because he was trying to get all of us focused on the reality that we are a spiritual people. And I teach a course called Original Spirituality, which is on values,
Right.
virtues, and principles.
Right.
We lived in societies that were organized by principles, values, and virtues, so that you organized your community based on laws that the entire community responded to with respect. You did not take your neighbor's goods. You did not kill your neighbors, property or otherwise. You did not do things against the value of someone else. And so from a principle point of view, we were originally in the continent expressing the highest identification of a divine being.
Amen.
And so we progressed at a rapid rate. We've slowed down now because we're just stimulated by confusion. But we were processed and expanding our knowledge so quickly that our evolution was rapid because we were already prepared to accept that we grew no mangoes, but we ate them and they were flourishing. Bananas were flourishing. Fruit was available to be eaten at all costs when we were unable to prepare ourselves in this massive continent, the first continent of human habitation.
That's right.
And so Dr. John Henry Clark is just reminding us that as the beginning of people on this earth, as the people of the essence, we were originally endowed with inalienable reality checks on our being a part of the divine. So that if in fact you are a part of the divine, not harming someone is natural.
Yeah.
Religions are created, and the first reality is rulership by assassination of your brother. You can't have a faith system that rules on that.
Right.
And that isn't the principle that religions should have opened as they were trying to become the controlling mechanism of a people. And so it doesn't really matter. All of the faiths have lost that reality. Hence, losing that reality, we lost our magic. We were able to do things with our minds in telepathic. We still have people today on the planet who are telepathic.
Yeah.
Right? Who can move things with their mind, who can communicate things. It happens in our own families. Your mother, as you can probably remember as children, would kind of say, something's wrong with, I haven't spoken to him in 3 months, but something's wrong with Graham. I don't know what it is, but I'm calling Graham and finding out that he's been sick for 2 weeks.
Sister, when I was in high school, even as a young child, I used to dream. And my grandmother would say, do not set your alarm clock. Wake naturally.
I do that often.
Your dreams come to you in the last moments of your sleep.
Right.
When I was in elementary school, I used to tell my classmates what was going to happen that particular day and what Mrs. Lopez, Sheila E. Lopez, would say to us when we went down to the auditorium to tune our instruments on one day. And they were like, how did you know this? And they went to her, they said, Mrs. Lopez, did you tell Graham that we were going to tune our own instruments for the first time? She said, no. Why? What is this about? Well, he told us earlier that you were going to do this, and he told us exactly what you were going to say, and you said exactly what he said. So, as I grew, and I had other dreams, and I have had dreams that have yet to come to fruition, and I haven't talked about them. But I remember in high school, I'm standing in the front yard of the house, and I see a plane flying, and the plane explodes. And I'm still standing in the yard, and the pieces of the plane are falling from the sky. They're falling in my direction, but I don't run. I stood there, and all the pieces of the plane are piled up in the front yard. And with that, I walk back into the house. And as I go back into the house, I wake up. And I said, "Mom," my grandmother was downstairs cooking breakfast. I said, "Ma," she said, "Yes, what is it?" I said, "I had another dream." She says, "Come down here." I come down to the kitchen. I said, "Ma," this is what she would tell me. And she could interpret my dreams. She was like Joseph. And she said, "What happened?" And I told her everything I saw in the dream. She said, "The plane flying was the spirit leaving the body." She said, "The explosion was the moment of death." She said, "The fact that the pieces fell towards you in our yard, it's a family member that passed." Ring, the phone rings as quick as she said that. "May? Edith?" Now, my Aunt Edith is calling from Boston, Roxbury, Intervale Street, 42 Intervale Street to be precise. My grandmother says to her, "Who passed?" She said, "How do you know someone passed?" She said, "Graham just gave me the dream and I gave him the interpretation. My cousin had just died minutes before." These, let me tell you, the spirit of the individual, we live in the flesh, but everything in the flesh is moved by spirit.
It is.
Right.
It is.
And there are various spirits and forces. They're all not good. You know, and I think about something when we say the God in me loves the God in you. That's not true for every person out there, because there are conflicting spirits.
Well, I'm only reaching out to people that understand that.
Yes.
And those are the people that understand the God that life.
Right. The spirit can come. A spirit can come, generate the behavior of an individual, and that individual is not even in control. Judas of Iscariot in the story of Jesus and the betrayal, you know. It says that when you read in Scripture, it says, when Judas left the supper, it says that Satan entered him. Not a demon, not another spirit. It says Satan himself entered Judas. And when it was done, it says that Satan left him. And Judas, coming back to himself, finds out what he had done. He's like, he committed suicide.
Right.
Moses, when Moses died, it says that God buried Moses and placed an archangel, a spirit being, to protect the gravesite of Moses. It also says that another spirit being came, Lucifer. He wanted the body of Moses. The angel said, I'm not looking to get my butt beat. He knew that he could not defend the body of Moses against Lucifer, Satan. He said, you know, the Lord rebuke you. I can't deal with this. The Lord rebuke you. And it says that Satan walked off. Imagine if he were able to get the body of Moses and resurrect it and take it back out to mislead the Israelites to God knows where. So the spirit force that is in each and every person, it is the spirit that moves the body.
And we need to deal with the spirit. On a spiritual level, we're not just dealing with ours, right? So Graham has told us a story about his grandmother who could interpret dreams. But what are we using in our beingness to interpret that? We are using our angels. And in original spirituality, the continuation of a good life continues. So I write about the concept of continuation of our existence. So a person passes away and they were not a very nice person, not a very caring person, certainly not a giver, not cheerful, not helpful, not thoughtful, not considerate. And people will say, because I've heard it all my life, oh, he's an ancestor now. And I'm trying to figure out,
he's a what?
He's an ancestor. You know, he's an ancestor now. And I've often said, you didn't like him on the planet. Why are you giving him such a noble stature in the afterlife? Not that I am to judge, there will be judgment, but if this person couldn't contribute to the humanity of our people as a beingness, there's possibly not an opportunity to just ascend to the realm of great people like Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman,
maybe
Mary
they didn't go to that particular area.
Well,
I understand.
He said not to, but the point is, why would they have that opportunity? I think that the knowledge of intelligence tells us
Have you
that
ever heard that if you do wrong this time, you get to come back? and relive this? That this
You're
is
talking
hell?
about
This is hell.
Sure, that
This is hell.
reincarnation.
And when we leave here,
this is
you
hell.
do right and you get out of hell. See?
Well, for some people, living on the planet Earth has been heavenly.
Yeah.
Right? It's been a wonderful experience.
I had an experience, a spiritual experience, just Sunday. I remember telling you about how my mother's came to me on Mother's Day.
Yes, you did.
And I felt this, because I put a picture up, and my mother talked to pictures, right? So I'm looking at a picture on Mother's Day, and this love energy just overcame all over me. I mean, I was in a miserable state. I was worried about, I was arguing about family. I was thinking about problems I'd had for years. And this love energy came over me, and I started crying and bawling like a baby. And Beverly comes out and said, "What happened?" I told her what happened. So Sunday, I got together with some old friends at the French restaurant on 125th Street. Everybody's 75 and older, and we're meeting people that I went to PS 186 in the 40s and early 50s.
OG club.
You know, yeah, this was
That's nice.
real fun. I remember you. Don't you remember me? And I met a woman that I knew from 186 who actually got me into M&N here. And I told her, she was on the board of directors. They were giving me a hard time by getting in. And she saw my name and recognized it and pushed me through. And I'm sitting there talking to her, and I talked to my sister, and my sister talking about old times. And she told me that on Mother's Day, she was crying. My mother had reached out to her and touched her. And she said to me, "I wonder if we're crying at the same time."
No. So you do have to ask that question.
I mean, it was so affirmative, you know, about our spirit. You know, that's my God. I mean, that's who I pray to. You know, I always
that's
go
who
to
you're
Mommy,
guided
because
by.
that's the most loving spirit I know, personally. So it was
And
just
that's
so
very
rewarding.
important to understand that when we adopted religion, I certainly adopted it from my parents. I
Right.
don't, you know?
Exactly.
And when you are in another country and your parents are in Islamic behavior, you're going to adopt it. You're going to adopt Shinduism. You're going to adopt Hinduism. And you're going to use this, and this is where I'm not against religion. And I always tell people it's important to understand that everybody has to get to a tool that teaches them about the higher being.
Right.
You have to get to the tool.
Right.
You can't just decide, I'm not going to have a tool, I don't need a tool, I exist because I am. You know, you have to get to a tool. So the religious concept has been very useful to us as a being, as people, right? We've needed a tool to find a path to a development of our higher power and our understanding of our greatness with God. So the tool has been useful. Unfortunately, you know, it's just like having a hammer. I can hit the nail to hang the picture, or I can hit a head, right?
Right.
A head of another human being and break a skull.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's the twofold, or and as the ancients would say in Africa, that is the duality, right? The law of opposites is a basic law.
Okay.
So for what is good, there is also something that is opposite of good within it.
Yes.
And that has to be uncovered in order to comprehend what is necessary for you to keep and what is necessary for you to disavow.
Well, isn't the devil a fallen angel?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. He was the highest of the heavenly host.
Right.
He was directly under God Almighty.
Right.
And it's interesting because when the Bible speaks about the angelic host, they were made with a will. They weren't robotic creatures that could not,
They were given a choice.
they could make decisions on their own.
Okay.
And it says in Scripture that Lucifer was like, you know, I think I could do this.
Right.
And he
The ego gets
convinced
out of hand.
others to join in with him.
Yeah.
And God knew what was going on. He wasn't stupid.
Right.
So he gave Lucifer some opportunities, like, man, check yourself. You know, let's get back to, but it says in the Scripture that there was a rebellion, and a third of the angelic host went against God with Satan. They lost, and they were cast out of heaven into the earth, it says. Now, when we talk about other beings, the scriptures also talk about the Nephilim, who were the giants in the earth.
Right.
You read about David and Goliath. Goliath stood around 9 feet tall.
Okay.
9 feet tall, and it says that the spear of his spear was made of the bow of a loom. And they give the weight of the head of the spear. I forgot how many pounds it is, but I used to throw the shot put in high school. I could throw a shot put 50 feet. Mm-hmm. But here is a man throwing a spear with a head that weighed about 30 pounds, and he's throwing it like nothing. So imagine the size. Look at the pro wrestlers that are weighing 260. These guys are no taller than me, most of them some 6'6", but imagine the guy 9 feet something standing there. The Nephilim are described in scriptures. It says also there was a time when they could procreate with the women of earth, with mankind.
Right.
Well, that gets back to the extraterrestrial concept that, you know, that your conversation alluded to as we begin to study Orion.
We've all heard about amphibians, right?
Right. Well, that's
mermaids and people coming from the water.
Yeah, but the Nephilim were real, as described in scripture.
Right.
And even what Dr. Clark alluded to, you know, when you adulterate the truth and use it for abusive reasons. Let's look at the curse of Ham. You know, black people, there's a curse on black people, therefore it was justified in subjugating black people for slavery. But what the Europeans did, first let me go back. Christianity is not a European religion. It doesn't come from Europe. Jesus Christ wasn't white. He didn't come from Europe. Jesus Christ was a black
Ethiopian.
man. He was a Semite. Semitic people have brown skin. He wasn't Jewish. He was an Israelite.
Hebrew.
Now, when you look at this, Noah had 3 sons following the flood. Noah didn't have a black son and 2 white sons. He had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And it's recorded that Noah got drunk and his nakedness was seen by his son. And whatever his son did or said, the other 2 went in and they covered their father. When Noah found out about it, it says he cursed Ham. He cursed Ham's children. Hamitic people are the people, the Nubians, the people from Egypt coming south from the Nile Delta along the east coast of Africa and
which
west.
Is how you really travel.
We are Hamitic people,
south
right?
To north, yes.
But Noah came out of a land, and most people came out of the land that we now call Iraq, near Turkey. But his other 2 sons, Japheth, went over the mountains into what is now Europe. His other son, Shem went east across the Sinai into India and China. All of these people have African blood.
Right.
They don't want to talk about it, but they've got it.
The original man was African.
Precisely.
Well, that's an explanation as to how Africans populated.
Right.
It's an allegory that explains the population of the world coming out of the mother.
Right.
Okay.
And again, it can be used to explain the positive reality of our beingness, but it can also be used to talk about the way that they talk about it.
But there's one
biblically.
thing, not to cut you off. In Genesis 9, verse 1, it says, "And God blessed Noah and his sons." If the Creator has chosen to bless you, can I get drunk and wake up and say, I curse you?
And
What
why?
credibility would you put in a drunkard compared to the credibility of Almighty God?
I think that whole story stinks.
It says, you know, if you can't curse what God has blessed, no man can. But that's what they use as a justification, also under the premise that, well, Noah had white sons and he had a black son. No, he didn't. These were all black people. These are all people of color.
But that is the
No
story.
mulattoes in there?
But well, you're trying to. Brother Christ is always getting worried about. We're not leaving you out of the family.
No, I know.
Your
I'm
complexion
getting-
doesn't
My
bother
name's
us.
Gilchrist.
Okay.
I'm automatic.
Complexion is
I'm
not
just
the
trying
issue.
to soothe everybody else's feelings. I never get hurt by that.
But you know,
I think it's silly.
the complexion does not come into this, right? What comes into this is human beings
Amen.
were created in the mother of civilization
Amen.
known as Africa. That's the essence of
Right.
everything. So we get an allegory that explains the traveling of the three sons, right, of Noah's after the flood,
Right.
based on the fact that there had to be peopling going on. So we get that. But let's go back to the original thought. African religions. African religions spawn up because as groups moved about the continent, and the continent in itself, people got to get comfortable with the reality of the vastness of the continent. South Africa, the United States fits into South Africa 3 times, just
That's
the
right.
south, you know, just the
Right.
southern hemisphere of the continent. So if you can understand the vastness of the continent and the exploratory reality, we were organizing under values, principles, and virtues. And as we were organizing, we were developing the skill of leadership, because we needed to revere and respect, as Dr. Clark was taking us through, our elders. They had roles to play.
Right.
And as they passed through this world, meaning they left this world, we believed that no human spirit could ever die.
Right.
It goes
We
on.
are those who created that thought.
That's right.
So that the human spirit continues and has, even in the afterworld, spaces of development and spaces of continual ascension. So that it would leave the body, it could stay close to the family for guidance. It could be one of your guides, your spiritual guide. It could invoke you to your genius, to your superior call
calling,
upon the
my
earth.
calling.
Your person, your purpose.
Yeah, right,
And
exactly.
that's one. But as it gets older, now that's what it was doing when you were 7 years old. But now you're 37. So that same energy has progressed in its world to another level, so that there are these continual levels in the spirit world. So you would get an angel, you would get a spiritual guide, then you would get an angel, and then you may start with just an answer. I just wanted just with an ancestor. An ancestor is where you started. And here as an ancestor, you're watching the 7-year-old, you know, Winston Gilchrist. We're going to inspire his dreams. We're going to inspire his understanding. And the next steps for that ancestor is to move to another place, because you've gotten older and you're being guided. So
Right.
the ancients believed these things. They believed that there was a continual reality with your human beingness in the flesh and those without their flesh anymore. So that you, grandma and grandpa, didn't just pass away, they remained a part of the family.
Yes,
and to
yes.
do so, we enshrine them. People are afraid of that now, but yet you go to a church and burn a candle at
Right.
St. Christopher and St. Joseph and Mary Magdalene and Mary, the Mother of God. You burn an incense, you burn a candle, but your mother passes and people don't put a picture up in their
So
house.
how do we explain how black people kill each other, and how many church pimps we can find out there? I mean,
You know,
people utilizing.
There is a
people use-
watering down.
It's such a clown act when we have all this basis spirituality in us, and this is the human experience of the spirit.
Because
True.
because religion can be attacked at any time and torn apart. You
Yes.
don't even have to believe.
Right.
Because the idea of religion doesn't have the value if it's just the thought of this is my religion. In the name of religion, jihad is a triumph.
Right.
Right? To have a holy war. What is holy about war?
The Ku Klux Klan
Yeah,
claim to
burn
be
crosses.
Christians.
Right.
Anything taken to extreme is a
Right,
mess.
because you
I saw it's special how Hitler and the Vatican were cohorts.
Absolutely. They had the
I
same,
mean,
right, the same final solution to their problem of these people with money and power in their space.
Right.
And the decision to eliminate them and to gain their money and their power.
Exactly.
So,
So
we-
I want to go back to African religion, and
Okay.
we got item 3. Just prepare us for item 3, and I just want to bring this back into it. We're talking about African religions, and this book I read in the 70s, when information was readily out there in New York. I mean, you didn't have any, you had Weiser's bookstore, you go in and find anything on spirituality, even you know, how to do spells. And I remember I went to this one shop where a warlock was running the shop.
Oh, you don't want to even play with that.
Yeah, right. I can believe it. I've met a couple
people
in
who mess
different
around
states.
with Ouija boards, which is the worst thing in the world. You're calling on a spirit, but it's a bad spirit.
They don't even know what it is.
Right.
They're not even
Right.
calling on anything they
So
understand.
we know
you.
this stuff exists, but we got to stay on the righteous side of it all. Just play item 3 and we'll come right back at you. All right?
This is a good show.
Away from the clamor of village life, in caves and rock shelters, the teachings of the Hogan are renewed. Tribal legend tells us that beings called Numo descended from the sacred star and appeared before the Dogon ancestors. The Dogon were entrusted by the Numo with 366 symbols, given without meaning. The Dogon were charged with interpreting them and preserving the information for future generations. The symbols reveal an astonishing scope of astronomical knowledge, an infinite number of stars and spiraling worlds. After more than 5 years among the Dogon people, Dr. Guggenheim has gradually gained the confidence of the Dogon elders and acceptance into the inner circle of secret knowledge.
The Dogon belief the universe was born in a vast explosion, and as it opened up, everything that we know about and everything that the Dogon know about in the world came pouring out, and nothing was left except a shell. This empty shell became the star that they call the Pontolo, and that we call Sirius B.
In 1950, astronomers confirmed the existence of the Dogon star. At the United States Naval Observatory, Washington, D.C., Chief Astronomer Dr. Irving Lindenblad devoted years to the search for the dark star.
The Sirius system is a very interesting challenge observationally because it is very difficult to observe a star 10 seconds from such a bright object as Sirius A.
After the years of effort, Dr. Lindenblad finally succeeded in taking this photograph of Sirius B and its giant companion. The Dogon possess even more startling information about the star they hold sacred. They say that when it gave forth all its energy, it collapsed in upon itself, becoming incredibly dense and so heavy that all the earthly beings combined cannot lift it. The San Fernando Observatory, Sylmar, California. Dr. Gary Chapman is an astronomer specializing in the physical characteristics of stars. By splitting the light collected from a distant star into colored bands, its physical characteristics can be analyzed.
Sirius B is fairly normal in the surface layers, but we do rely on the calculations to tell us that the interior is essentially out of nuclear fuel. It's a dead star. We know from modern calculations that it has a very, very high density, has a density about 5 million times that of water, and if you were to be on the surface of Sirius B right now, you'd be crushed very, very flat because the surface gravity is about 100 million times that of the Earth.
The symbol is explained. The knowledge preserved in rituals through the centuries has been confirmed. Beyond the Dogon knowledge of the dark star, the symbols reveal more information about the celestial universe. They correctly place the Earth and our solar system within the Milky Way, and state correctly that the massive cluster of stars is far more distant than the planets. The understanding of astronomical movements led the Dogon to investigate the human anatomy. They discovered the circulation of blood in the body long before it was discovered by the English physician William Harvey in the 17th century. These symbols and the knowledge they hold are the legacy of the mysterious Numos, the messengers from the dark star.
Now, a little explanation for this. The Nemos are actually amphibious beings. You look further into the history, a lot of people don't believe that this knowledge was brought to the Dogons by extraterrestrials. This is an argument we got to with Dr. J, all right, right here on this show. So I propose that when we bring on Rosalind Jeffries, who knows a whole lot about the Dogons, I understand she spent some time with them. Mm-hmm. Is that true?
That's my understanding.
And she can even elaborate on this even more. A good Christian girl out of Harlem and a Sunday school teacher. All right, Dr. Jeffries' wife, Rosalind Jeffries. So that's my take on the Dogons.
You know,
What say you about African religion? Now, this is an African religion.
Now, it's deeper than an African religion. It was an African-based explanation for the development of humans upon the earth.
Okay.
That's deeper than a religion.
Okay.
Religions don't justify the reason that we're born or the reason that we're here or the reason that we appeared. But what the Dogons experience, and see, I say Dogons do God, you know, people that were doing the God thought are not just in, you know, West Africa. They're all over the world. There are people, as we started explaining earlier, that have the same body of knowledge and the same wisdom in Peru.
That's right.
Right? So you travel to Peru, there are pyramids there.
That's right.
You travel to Peru, they have what they call the insights. They're using it and calling it the insight, but the insight on the evolution of Earth is very much in line with what the Dogons profess to have as their oral tradition.
Mm-hmm.
So how could two separate worlds apart have the very same knowledge, except that the knowledge existed? So that as the basis for what Dr. John Henry Clarke is explaining.
Okay.
Dr. John Henry Clarke is saying whatever combustible energy created this ball called Earth, we are the essence of it.
Okay.
And that we come out of the universe with everything we need to progress.
Right.
And we were progressing at a rapid rate. Michio Kaku explains that there was another phenomenon that wiped people off the planet, the Noah story, right? That at one time the planet was taken over by water, right? We're talking about some 50, 60,000 years ago. We were existing, we had a societies, we were growing in number, and then there was a catastrophic event.
Destruction of Atlantis.
The destruction of the planet. All people that existed, all animals, all things went underwater.
You know, geologists have done studies on strata of the Earth. And they found on every continent the same markings of a great flood.
Yes.
The same silt, the composition of silt at various levels, and they all go back to the same time period. And that would be impossible. We do have floods in regions of the world, but they all chronologically line up with the same period. In the Aztecs have records of a great flood, a deluge which wiped man off the earth.
So we were wiped out, right? 50, 60,000 years ago, let's say 55,000 years ago, just to be safe. And then we had to emerge again. Now, the interesting and the most intriguing thing about this emergence that we should begin to understand on the continent is that we emerged again and still continue to understand our relationship with the universe.
My old pastor used to say that ancient man was far more intelligent than we will ever be. being closer to the original man with superior knowledge and understanding.
Totally.
When I was in Abu Dhabi a couple of months ago, no, it was in Dubai. I was in a museum, and they had a water clock, an elephant water clock. This clock was built over 3,500 years ago, and it runs on water. Water keeps perfect time. Long before Timex, long before Movado, long before any of these other Swiss makers, there was a scientist in the Middle East who built a clock that ran and still runs on water and keeps time to the second.
Wow.
They don't know how the ancients built when they were building the Aswan Dam and flooded many of the archives of ancient Egypt. They had to move the tombs of the pharaohs up 100 feet to higher land. They had no cranes that could lift one stone.
Right.
They had to cut the stones up to move them. And the question was, how did they get them there without hydraulics, without electricity?
Mental.
See,
It's all a mental.
there are, well, again, you can conceive, whatever you can conceive of doing,
can achieve.
you can achieve.
Absolutely.
All right? And we have lost a whole lot. Our minds are clouded. We're distracted. Even healing, they talk about. I've seen, there was a guy who was shot in the head in Bed-Stuy years ago in the 60s. A sniper just shot him randomly. A friend of ours, we went to Kings County, and he was dying. Blood pressure was dropped, everything was going. He was paralyzed on one side, bullet in his brain. They said, we can't even go in there to get it. We went, and we stood around him in a coma, and we talked to him. We prayed over him, and we left. Sunday morning, who walks into church Sunday morning?
This same brother.
He walked in. We prayed for his healing. He walked in the church. He wasn't paralyzed. The bullet to this day is still in his brain. The doctor said we don't know how. That's okay.
Transference of energy. That's another wonderful part of our culture.
Sympathetic resonance.
To be able
Human
to,
culture.
yeah, to be able to do healings without doctor interference. We were doing these things. You know, when we were listening to the message that Leonard Nimoy, his name happens to be Nemo, was describing, he talked about these ancient people being given 300 symbols, and then the people of Ghana have 26 symbols symbolizing, one of them I brought today, right, the God Supreme, you know, Nyame. But the symbols and the concepts are still the same. What I think is happening as we're awakening as a people, we are awakening to our spiritual selves, and we are getting really tired of having to be in philosophies that don't allow us to elevate that. I think that religion, as I said before, is the first foundation of your education toward God. You're 2 and 3 years old, and you're on your knees saying, God, you know, now I lay me down to sleep.
You know,
I pray the Lord my soul to keep, you know, etc. But then you're growing up, and you're growing up in that faith only to expand it. So when I'm teaching people about original spirituality, I'm not asking them to give up their religion. I'm asking them to begin to evaluate their faith.
Right. Okay.
Because the law of opposites is an African traditional reality. It wasn't a religion because the law of opposites explains for all that is good, or for all that is good, I want to use my right hand, there is also equally something the opposite of it, and that it exists in the world. Tolkien, this master scientist who passed away last year, that was the talk of the town, talking about dark matter, and there being this alternative. You throw a ball into a particular space and it can go into dark matter. What is dark matter? And they've just discovered it, right? 50, 60 years later, they are realizing that there is this additional universe, right? It's a realm that may even have an ulterior Gilchrist on the other side, who may not be.
Universes,
right.
Sure.
So all of these things are coming out of our intellectual understanding as we are evolving as spirits. as we are evolving. So all of it begins in the mother, because even when the great flood happened and yet we were resurrected with the knowledge and the continual knowledge of our existence and the divine being a part of our existence.
Right.
It is when we separate from the divine, I think, that we lose
That's it.
the essence
That's
of
it.
original spirituality and all of the knowledge that goes with it. Just stepping away from that concept that I have it all, without knowing that you're constantly returning back to that which was, so that you can use all the knowledge that the infinite holds within the wisdom of the world, of the worlds beyond this one.
Well, your calling is coming to light. No, I'm telling you, it's beautiful. Every time you come here, sisters, you always add that extra shine that we need.
I thank you.
Make us smile even broader.
Thank you, I
And
do.
this Gilchrist experience has been joyful
Well,
because of your joyous spirit.
thank you.
And the thoughts of my mommy being God, and her restoring all that spirituality in me, and my sister just Sunday just bringing everything to
Wow.
reality. I mean,
But that's a gift.
I smile.
Crying at the same time in different places.
She broke out a picture and showed people my mother's picture, and I just
Felt the
it
love.
was just, it's so good to feel that much love energy. And she verified that we both cried. We didn't check the time, but it was the same
On
day.
the same day, probably at the same
So
time.
mommy was looking out for her. My mother's looked out for me for forever. She died when I was 22, and I hated God for years, man. I mean, I was an evil demon. Boy,
It was,
I don't like
yeah, it was
nobody.
called death anger,
But-
which happens to a lot of us.
But that happened to you too, Graham.
Death
Did you get
anger
kind of,
is real.
My mother and father, especially this past Father's Day, my father's been dead 66 years. And it was really difficult for me on Father's Day, thinking about him, And I remember different things, different places we went, things he taught me. But I'm thankful to God that I had him, even though it was a short time. And it bothers me when I see kids disrespecting their parents.
right.
They're angry with their mother, angry with their father. Stop that. Even if your parents are wrong,
right.
love them. You're only
Amen.
going to get one mother and one father.
That's right.
I think that's a
And
great
you
lesson.
guys here in Manhattan, the God in me loves the God in you. You see why? Because everybody, even if your devil's in charge, you got a God in there somewhere. Power to the people.
You worried about them having the devil inside? Well, it's
all
the
of
law
us
of
do.
opposites.
All of us
Yeah.
do.
Okay, it's the
All of
law,
us
but
do.
again,
Yin
a
yang.
principle that the ancients knew as we began to look at the universe and ourselves and are facing ourselves in the mirror, that for all that we have done good, there is a desire also to do opposite. And so that one has to evolve to the point where they get to see the duality and then make a decision. And I think that's what makes us human. Right? We
Right.
have choice,
Right. Right.
consistent
Exactly.
choice. And when we make the right choices, things change.
Right.
And it's in our hands.
That's
It's
it.
always in our hands to say, I will not, or I will. Or, it's just as easy for me to take this lady's wallet out of her bag.
Hey, and just remember this. The devil's in the White House now, and it's nothing but a test of your spirituality. Power to the people. God bless.
That was good.
Perfect timing.
You got that. You snuck that one in, no question. For people to get, because people are still weeping, Sometimes